Our next speaker before lunch is one of my favorite people on earth. He is hilarious. He's written some of the funniest stories in print and on the radio. And he has a new book out which comes out in paperback in 2 weeks. It's out in hardback now, called Bunch of Amateurs in Search of American Character. Please help me welcome Jack Hitt.
So I need a music stand.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Right. Hello. A few years ago, I became kind of obsessed with amateurs of all kinds. And I just started calling around to find out, like, what were people doing in their garages and their little weekend clubs? And I heard that some amateur synthetic biologists were starting up clubs here and there, one here in Boston. So I came up here and I talked to a couple of these guys and met in the place where they were doing their work. And they were showing me their homemade lab. It was so cool. They were like, they had Tupperware containers, and they had, they'd used a Charlie card to create like a DNA comb. The blue dye that they used was fished out of literally that blue dye that you get in, fish tanks, aquarium stores, that kind of stuff. And I was just thinking, like, wow, that is so great. That is so cool. I mean, it cost all of, a few bucks, right? And the guy said, yeah, and one of the things you need for this kind of work is glycerol, and we get it out of these suppositories. I was like, yeah, that is also cool. And then I got wind of another club opening up in San Francisco. And I called around and I found out that there was a young self-taught biologist out there named Meredith Patterson. And she was attempting to insert the glow-in-the-dark plasmid into some yogurt bacteria to grow it in order to create a rave necklace that you would be able to wear in San Francisco late at night. And when you got hungry or exhausted from dancing all night, you could snap open your glow-in-the-dark necklace and have a little nutrition. So I called her up and flew out there, and she also had one of these homemade labs in her kitchen. It was phenomenal. Her centrifuge was a salad spinner. She had a pressure cooker. She had one of these refrigerator oven combo units that come in like RVs that keep, everything in the right temperature. And she was telling me that, she goes, yeah, and one of the things you need for this work is glycol. And I get mine by extracting it from this stuff here, Astroglide, a sex lube. So I've been thinking about this ever since I was in San Francisco. The difference between East Coast amateur biologists and West Coast amateur biologists, that when they open their medicine cabinets, they reach for what's in there. And I'll leave it up to the panel after lunch to figure out what the cultural significance of that is. But anyway, when I was talking to Patterson over time, because after I left her, we stayed in touch, and she became sort of more attracted to other pursuits, more practical ones. She was trying to develop a test for melamine. Remember, there was a moment there a few years ago when all this stuff from China was coming. It was had this poison in it or on it, and she was trying to develop a test that would be able to, either through creating some kind of odor, be able to test positive for the presence of this thing. And very quickly, if you kept in touch with the amateur biologist types, their projects became less silly and sort of more serious. Although if you go back only 6 years to Freeman Dyson's sort of kind of landmark essay on this subject in the New York Review of Books, he has a great line where he says, we'll know that synthetic biology has reached a certain sort of maturation when school kids come home with kits to engineer their own pets, or housewives can engineer their own strange flowers for their gardens, right? So 48 hours ago, as I was getting ready for this, I looked on Kickstarter, and this image is up there. It's a plan to construct a glow-in-the-dark plant, right? Within, I think, 1 hour, they had, I believe, $20,000. They need less than $100,000. For $40, you get a pack of seeds of this plant, due to be arrived in 2014. Immediately on the train yesterday, I got online, ordered, gave my $40, and I'm already checking the mail. But in Dyson's essay, he has this wonderful metaphor about how we might be able to adapt plants into some kind of silicon activity to the idea of being like to make solar panels out of something that grows. But here they've just gone the complete natural step, right? Which is to take, I believe it's part of the firefly gene and part of the sea pansy, if I have this right, and splice this into a plant. Even though the image here is of an entire plant glowing in the dark, I thought maybe what they should try to do is focus the glow-in-the-dark feature in one part of the plant, either some kind of special leaf or a fruit or something, so that I just love the idea of sitting in my chair with this plant hanging over me like a lamp, reading my book, by my ficus tree or something. And if we could do that, then I think we could come up with a really fancy word for that, particular outgrowth. Maybe call that a light bulb. Anyway, if you read some of the comments there on this Kickstarter, already there's a lot of people very worried, right? One guy says, oh my God, what's going to happen when we create these, glow-in-the-dark trees, with street lights, right? And then the seeds get, passed on, and they move out, and they go into the country. And then we have, glow-in-the-dark plants all over the rural areas. We lose our dark skies. We alter the environment. Animals, everything changes, apocalypse, right? And I have to say, having hung around now with all kinds of amateurs for the last couple of years, this kind of reaction has this weird sort of deja vu for me, and possibly for you. When synthetic biology first hit sort of like the public domain, see if you remember this. What about teenagers weaponizing Spanish flu? That's what's going to happen, right? And there was a lot of deep concern. In fact, the article, I knew it was coming, and it did come. It came in the newspaper I write for, the New York Times, and it was this article, and it said, the New York Synthetic Biology DIY Club had opened, and the fear was, oh my God, what about the kids? What about they're just going to be unleashed with this synthetic biology? What are we going to do to stop them, right? And I have to say, 20 years ago, I wrote an article about computer hacking. And at the time, that article came out, but it was like, oh my God, these guys will be able to crash the entire AT&T phone system. Okay, I don't want to ridicule that fear because it shows up every time. Every time. When I was researching this book, I found a kid who had put together an actual reactor in his backyard. He had scraped little bits of radioactive material off of smoke detectors, right, 100 of them, and built his own, appliance in the backyard. And what was interesting when I contacted the EPA to find out, what was going to happen with all this, was that this was the 17th kid that they had interacted with who had built this kind of reactor in the backyard. So it wasn't the first time this had happened, right? And just yesterday, I was interviewing some people who are involved in 3D printing. And they were already telling me that, they're already getting word that the fear is that they're going to print a plastic knife that will be able to pass through airport security, or perhaps you've heard this, print a gun. And then all of a sudden, all of these Second Amendment arguments will now become First Amendment arguments about programming language, right? I was talking to the DIY drone crowd. Same thing. Oh my God. The adults are already terrified. What are we going to do about the DIY drone crowd? Those clubs are now forming. So I have a charge for you today. I think we should put together a kind of handbook on emerging technology. And every time one of these things pops up, we could almost just, maybe it should be a PDF. When you're starting your amateur club, you could just go to this PDF and find out that, yes, basically every one of these clubs, whether it's homebrew computers in the 70s or, robotics in the 80s or SynBio now or DIY drone soon, there are certain panic attacks that will come. And here's how to deal with them. Here's how to make the case why you should be able to form your club. And this a whole ocean of nonsense that also follows. So it seems like there's two things that happens when you form these amateur clubs. One is we get the panic and the pearl clutching and the article in the New York Times that says, oh my God, the children have this technology, right? And then we have the kind of, I don't know what to call this. It's sort of like the Jenny McCarthy side of it, or oh my God, vaccines cause autism, or there's a kind of other sort of panic, or I don't know. It's just sort of like an ocean of nonsense. And I'll give you one example because I just saw this a couple of days ago, and I remember thinking, oh, that's going to open up an ocean of nonsense. So I just read Michael Pollan's new book, Cooked. It's fantastic. Go buy it today. In the 4th chapter on fermentation, he has, there's a whole riff in there about gut bacteria, right? And then I just happened to notice when I was coming here today that the lead article in Mother Jones is this great piece about gut bacteria. And then just a few months ago, I was doing some reporting. I was in Amsterdam, and I was talking to these Dutch scientists, and they were telling me about fecal transplants. Oh, let's have a show of hands. How many people know what I'm talking about, huh? Yeah? Oh, yeah. Okay, there you go. This is my crowd right here. And the minute I heard this, I just thought, oh, once I heard it, this is all the things it can do. We can maybe change, obesity patterns. We can change all kinds of behavioral patterns or health issues, all with fecal transplants, right? And this is all about gut, bacteria. And I just thought, okay. And if you read Pollan's essay, it's a very charmingly sober account of what the possibilities are here. But that out there in the shuttered Rolfing parlors and in the colonic rinse spas that are now losing money, they're looking at this phrase, gut bacteria. They're looking at this phrase, fecal transplant, and they're thinking, oh, yes. Like I said, an ocean of nonsense is about to come pouring down on us. And those words, trust me, will soon be in everyone's vocabulary. So I think if you make this handbook, I would like to see instructions to the amateur biologist, or the amateur, dronist, the amateur 3D printer, on how to sort of understand and explain to the world at large just what it is that you're doing, right? And why the need for amateur clubs is exactly what will most ably control the very fears that you're articulating. But then also, and I don't know how we do this, and this is really a panel that y'all will have to figure out, but I think at some point we have to figure out how to stop this inevitable and very predictable just tsunami of nonsense that comes out of every new emerging technology. Well, I have 30 seconds left, so I'm going to close on that point. Thank you for coming.